you have an absolute function, okay? For instance, if you have something like this, f of x to be equal to an absolute of what? X, like this, okay? As always, anytime, because we said the range is associated with the y value, we have to always equate f of x to what? Y. So we are going to have, let f of x to be equal to what? Y. And at the end, we have y is equal to an absolute of what? X. Now, this is what I want you to know. An absolute of x always come with a form. When you plot the graph, you have a V shape. It will look like this, always. Okay, always. It will look like what? A V shape. An absolute, because when you have a graph like this, let's say this is your x and this is your y. And we know absolute can be positive and what? Negative. So at the end, we are going to get a positive values here and we are going to get what? Negative values here. Is that okay? So it's going to look like what? A V shape always. All right. Now let's take a look at how this one is going to look like. So we have y is equal to an absolute of what? X. Y is equal to an absolute of x. I want you to take notice of this as usual. So let's take notes. Now, what is the sign of the x, the variable in the absolute? The sign is what? Positive, right? And the absolute itself, the bracket, which is like this, is also was positive, right? So if it is positive and the variable or whatever is in the absolute is also positive, then we can have our graph look like this. It's very simple. It's just going to look like this. This is your x value and this is your y. And at the end, because it is x and x will be equal to what? Whatever is in the absolute bracket, we equate it to 0. Then we solve for the variable, which is x. Because this one is just x, x is equal to 0. So we are going to have what? X is equal to 0. And when x is equal to 0, we are going to get a positive or a negative for what? This one. And we are going to have something like this. So it will be like this. And at the end, our range, the range of the function is going to be from 0 to positive infinity. Okay? The range of the function is going to be from 0 to positive infinity. Is that okay? Now let's say this is number 1. We are going to do about 4 or 5 of them, and then we look at the difference very well. Okay. Now let's look at number 2. Number 2, when we have y to be equal to, sometimes you can have the equation to be, the function to be y to be equal to something, or the function to be f of x to be equal to something. When you have f of x in the case of question 1, then you have to change it from f of x to what? Y. So when we have y is equal to absolute of x plus 3, okay, like this. Now, we note those things again before we plot the graph. We have our graph to be like this, our x and our y. Now, I want you to note this. Note them. And I told you, you don't need to always write the notes, but you need to take notice of them so that it will help you to be able to plot the graph. What is the sign of the absolute bracket? It's positive, right? What is the sign of x? X is also what? Positive. Now, and what is the sign of y? Or what y is equal to what? In this case, you realize that when x is equal to 0, when x is equal to 0, y will be equal to what? 3. When x is equal to 0, the whole of this will go to 0. Okay, let's say the whole of this will go to 0. And we have y to be equal to what? Positive 3. So y is what? Positive 3 here. Let me use the black pen. Y is positive 3 here. Now let's try to draw our graph. Drawing the graph, when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 3. We will get it from here. Let's say somewhere here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. When x is equal to 0, y will be equal to what? 3. And the vertex, when you say vertex, is the turning point. So the vertex will be equal to what? X is 0, y is what? 3. Okay. All right. Now let's plot the graph. The sign of the absolute bracket is what? Positive. Positive means it's going to look like a V shape. Okay. So we are going to have a V shape, and the turning point is what? 3. Positive 3 of y. So we are going to have something like this. And this one will look like this. It goes up like this one. And at the end, the range of the function is going to be positive 3 to positive infinity. Is that okay? Positive 3 to positive infinity. Now, you might think this is so easy and simple. Yes, it is easy and very simple. But let's look at when we have a negative involves. I know many of you are afraid of negative, but trust me, you are going to find it very easy and simple, okay? So let's look at question 3. Now, question 3, when we have f of x to be equal to an absolute of x minus 2 minus what? 3, okay? Now, this is a complete new question. Let's solve this. We are going to find the value of x and y, okay? So to find the value of x and y, first of all, let's equate the function to what? Y. So let's f of x to be equal to what? Y. So we are going to have y is equal to x minus 2 minus 3, okay? Now, let's find the value of x, y, and then the sign of what? The absolute bracket. So the absolute bracket is equal to what? Positive. What I mean by positive is sometimes you can have an minus, let's say 1 minus an absolute of x like this. And if that happens, it means minus 1 is multiplying the absolute. In that case, this one will be what? Negative. Okay. But in our case now, we have all positive. So let's concentrate on the positive one. When you get negative question 2, you will know how to solve it. All right. Now let's move on. So this one is positive. What is the value of x? Let's solve for x. And what is the value of y? We solve for y. Okay. So the value of x, let's take the absolute number. X, we have x minus 2. Then we equate it to what? 0. And we're going to get x to be equal to what? 2. So the value of x is 2. And then let's take a look at the value of what? Y. The value of y simply means when x is 0, the whole of this will cancel, okay? And we have y is equal to minus 3. All right. So we're going to have y to be equal to minus 3. Is that okay? Now let's try to plot the graph. So we're going to have something like this. This is our y, axis, and x. We know that. Now, when x, the vertex is going to be 2 and minus 3, okay? And when I say vertex, I mean the vertex is the turning point or the minimum or maximum point, whichever way. In our case, let's plot 2 minus 3. So 2 minus 3, 2 is x. So we go 2 on the positive side, 1, 2. Okay? This is 1, 2. And minus 3. Minus 3 on y-axis is down here. Minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. And when we trace this one, they are going to meet somewhere here, right? They will meet somewhere here. Now, we are going to plot or draw the graph for this. What is the sign of the absolute bracket? It is positive. When it is positive, it means it's going to be in the form of what? V shape. So we are going to have it like V shape like this. We are going to have something like this. And we are going to have it to infinity like this. And at the end, our range will be equal to the range of the function will be equal to -3 to positive infinity. Is that okay? Someone might ask, why is it that we have -3 here and we have +2 here? But we wrote the range to be what? Only -3. The range, as I said, we have this one to be the domain. And domain is the same as what? The x values. codomain, and it's the same as what? Y values. But the codomain is equal to the range when we have exact same images from what? The domain. What I mean is when we have something like this, when we have 1 to 1, this is A, B, and C, and this is 1, 2, and 3. Okay, in this case, the codomain is the same as what? The range. And if the codomain is the same as the range and is the same as what? Y, then if you want to find the values of Y, you only write it to what? Trace it to the Y axis. So this is for the X, okay? This is for the X, and this is for the Y at the turning point. So when you trace it to the Y, you get what? -3. That is why we have -3, exact -3 to positive infinity, because this one goes to what? Positive infinity to what? Y. Is that okay? Now let's try to look at another negative question. When we have question like this, Y is equal to this question 4, right? Y is equal to 2 minus X minus 3, okay? Right. I know if later on you are watching this on YouTube, you can pause it and solve it before you continue. Just give it a try. You can try, or you can think of how the graph will look like. Okay. The first thing we have to do is our X and Y axis. And the second thing is to change the f of X to Y. But this question, we have f of X or f of Y already. Now let's try to note our items. The sign of the absolute number is what? Negative. So if it is positive, it's like V. So if it is negative, it will be what? Like this, okay? This is positive and this is negative. But now here is the case, we have a negative one today, at the moment. What is the value of X? Let's solve for X. X minus 3 is equal to 0. Therefore, X will be equal to what? X will be equal to positive 3. What about Y? When the whole of the absolute is equal to 0, Y will be equal to what? Positive 2. Is that okay? Y will be equal to positive 2. Now let's try to plot it. Vertex. Our vertex is going to be X value, which is 3, and Y value, which is 2. That is the vertex. So now let's plot it. I'm telling you again, we don't need to write all these, but you need to know them to help you to be able to plot the graph, okay? All right, so the vertex is going to be 3, 1, 2, 3 to be here, and the Y value is going to be what? 2. And 2, we are going to have it is positive 2. So we are going to go up 2 times. And at the end, where do they meet? They meet here, right? So we are going to have it here. Okay. Mind you, the sign of the absolute number or the absolute bracket is what? Negative. And when it is negative, it goes down. So we are going to have it like this. Like this. Okay. Now let's try to write the range of this function. The range of this function is going to be, this is negative infinity, right? And this one too, when we trace it to the Y values, you're going to still get negative infinity. So this is going to be negative infinity to positive 2. Okay? Negative infinity to what? Positive 2. Please, now take a look at this. Look at the difference between this and this. This one and this one. This one, we wrote the number first before the infinity. This one, we wrote the infinity first before what? The number. What is the difference? The difference is we always try to write the lowest number first before we write what? The biggest number or the highest number. So the highest number in this case is what? 2. And the lowest is negative infinity. On our left side, the lowest number is -3 and the highest is positive infinity. So always try to write the smallest number first before the biggest number or the highest number. Is that okay? All right, now let's try to finish with this on the square root. What if we have a square root? When we have a function that involves a square root. Let's look at that first. After that, we solve some multiple questions. Okay. So if you have example, a function, let's say f of x to be equal to square root of what? X. It's the same thing. We are going to consider the same thing. Okay. And a square root of a number is always like this. When you plot the graph looks like this. It looks like this. That is when everything, all of the signs are what? Positive. It either look like this, like this, like this, or like that. Okay. We are going to consider the 4 types. And after that, we will end this and solve some examples. So first, let's equate this. Let f of x to be equal to what? Y. So we have y is equal to square root of what? X. Now, we are going to also note things down. This is our x and y and x. This is 0, our origin or the intersection. What you need to note down is, what is the sign of the square root? It is what? Positive. What is the sign of the x variable? It's also what? Positive. And when you look at the function, okay, or if you look at the graph, this side is positive for y, and this side is also positive for what? X. So at the end, we are going to plot, or the graph will go in this direction. So we go this direction. Is that okay? And if the range of this function will be what? 0 to positive infinity, because it goes like this. It will go to positive infinity. Right. Now let's look at another one. When we have y is equal to, let's say, square root of a negative x. How is it going to look like? We said it earlier on that we cannot have a square root of what? A negative number. But for us to find the range, we can. So let's try to plot or graph this one. We are going to have it like this. When y is positive, y, the whole of this, if the whole of this is 0, y will be what? 0. And y is going to be what? Positive. So if y is positive, what will be the value of x? X is what? Negative. Okay, let me write them. Y will be positive. Y will be positive, and x will be what? Negative. The sign of the square root is what? Positive. That's what I mean, okay? The sign of the square root is positive. So it means that when x is negative, the whole of this is x is negative, right? So we are going to plot our graph to look like this, okay? Because x is negative, it will go this way. And anytime the square root is positive, it will be up here. When the square root is positive, it will be up here. The square root is positive will be up there, okay? And when x is negative, it comes this way. When x is positive, it goes this way. And when the square root is negative, it comes downwards. All right, now let's try to plot this. Okay, so we are going to have something like this to be the graph, and our range of this function is going to be, range of the function is going to be 0 to positive infinity, because it starts from here, which is 0, okay, and it goes to positive infinity this side, and this is the y axis. All of this side is what? Positive for y. So it's going to have 0 to positive infinity. Now let's look at another situation whereby we have y to be equal to negative square root of negative x. Now we have the sign of the square root to be what? Negative. It simply means it's going to go below the horizontal line, below the x axis. So now let's look at the way it will look like. This is our x and this is our y. Because our square root is negative and our x is negative, x being negative will be here, right? And the square root is also negative, so it will come below the x axis. So at the end, we are going to have something like this. Okay, and the range will be range of the function will be what? Minus infinity to 0, because it starts from what? 0 here. Is that okay? Now let's look at the last one. Please, is that okay? When we have, okay, I thought now the last one will be what? This side, and this side will be what? When x is positive and the square root is negative. Now let's say we have y to be equal to, the square root is negative and x is positive, okay? So we're going to have something like this, y and x. And because the square root is negative, it will come below the x-axis. And y is positive, so this side is positive for what? X. So we are going to have something like this. Okay? It's going to go something like this. And we are going to write our coordinates as negative, range of the function is going to be negative infinity to positive, to 0. Is that okay? All right, so that will be the end. Now let's try to solve some questions together.